Rich, powerful, but untouched at 35. No woman had ever made him surrender, until a beggar far too beautiful appeared and broke down all the Millionaire's walls. What's your guess for the ending of this story? Write in the comments, subscribe to the channel, and tell us which city you're watching from. I'm certain this will be the most moving story you'll ever hear. As the sun began to set over the hill crest, horizon, Robert Sullivan switched off all the devices in his mansion and began his daily ritual of isolation. At 35, the Chicago native had built a technological empire few could imagine. His app, Connect Sun, had revolutionized how anxious and introverted people communicated in the digital world while avoiding physical contact. The irony didn't escape. He had made a fortune helping others deal with the same fear he himself harbored. From the balcony of his mansion, he observed the luxurious gated community below. Hillcrest was the perfect refuge for someone like him. Exclusive, protected, isolated. The glass and concrete fortress he called home sat at the highest point of the community, surrounded by an impeccable garden that no one besides hired landscapers had ever seen. Not even his executive team knew his personal address. Human contact was limited to the strictly necessary. "Mr. Sullivan, the meeting with investors is confirmed for Monday," announced the electronic voice of his personalized virtual assistant. Robert nodded to no one in particular. The device didn't need visual confirmation, another feature designed to avoid any simulation of human contact. The Chicago sky was beginning to darken as he entered his office. The walls, covered in dark wood, housed shelves filled with books that had never been handled by hands other than his own. On the central desk, 3 monitors displayed Sullivan Tech's stock prices, a company valued in billions that he had built from nothing. "Remove the stock charts," he ordered. The monitors changed to display the latest usage reports for Connect Sun. Numbers, statistics, projections, the world reduced to something predictable, controllable. That's how Robert preferred it. As he reviewed the data, his thoughts wandered to dinner. As always, it would be a pre-prepared meal, delivered by a premium service that left orders in a special box at the property entrance. No delivery people, no interactions. Robert glanced at the only photograph in his office, a 12-year-old boy smiling next to a dog. The boy was himself, before everything changed, before Caroline. Caroline Mendez had been his first girlfriend at 17. They attended the same private school in Brookline, one of the most exclusive neighborhoods in Boston. For months, she seemed genuinely interested in the shy boy who preferred programming to playing football. Until, at a party, while everyone waited for Robert to arrive with the semester's final project he had done for the entire class, Caroline revealed the truth. "Did you really think I liked you?" she asked, surrounded by laughing friends. "It was just a bet, silly. Who could get the nerd to help everyone and still think he had a girlfriend?" That night, something broke inside him. Not just his trust in Caroline, but his trust in any possibility of genuine human connection. Since then, each potential relationship was analyzed like a faulty algorithm, with too many variables, unacceptable risks. Now, almost 2 decades later, Robert was a powerful and lonely man. Business magazines called him the reclusive genius, or the invisible billionaire. Some speculated about secret romances with models or actresses. Others swore he lived a double life abroad. The truth, however, was much simpler and more painful. Robert Sullivan, at 35, had never known the physical intimacy of a woman since that night. Not for lack of opportunities, but by conscious choice. Emotional control had become his mantra, his fortress, his prison. "Victoria is on the line," announced the virtual assistant, interrupting his thoughts. "Accept," he responded, adjusting his posture. The central screen lit up with the face of Victoria Matthews, 38, partner and chief operations officer of Sullivan Tech. With black hair always impeccably styled and astute eyes, she was Robert's opposite, expansive, strategic, ruthless in business. "Finally found you," she said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "The South Koreans are interested in integrating our technology into their devices. We need to respond by Monday." Send the contract. I'll review it tonight. You're always working, Robert. You should get out of that cave sometimes. Let's have dinner. I can be there in an hour. Robert felt the familiar tightness in his chest. Victoria always tested his limits, always tried to cross the barriers he erected. I'm in the middle of an important analysis. Another day, perhaps. Her expression hardened for an instant, almost imperceptible to anyone who hadn't known her for years. Of course, as always. Then softening. It's been 8 years of partnership, Robert. Someday you'll need to trust someone. The irony didn't escape Robert. Trust was exactly what Victoria wanted from him, and exactly what he couldn't give. What she didn't know, what no one knew, was that her professional interest hid a personal desire that would never be reciprocated. "Good night, Victoria," he responded, ending the call. Outside, the Chicago sky was heavy. The weather forecast announced severe storms for the night. Robert observed the dark clouds approaching, feeling a strange premonition. His life, so meticulously organized, had followed an unchanging rhythm for years. Wake up, work, eat, sleep. A perfect and predictable cycle. What he didn't know was that in a matter of hours, this cycle would be irrevocably broken by a knock on his door. As the first raindrop touched the window of his office, Robert returned to the reports, ignoring the worsening weather outside. Inside his digital fortress, protected by state-of-the-art security systems and the comfort of solitude, he felt safe. If only he knew that the forming storm would bring much more than water and wind. It would bring a change that none of his algorithms could predict. The storm began as a whisper and quickly transformed into a furious roar. Lightning cut across the Chicago sky, momentarily illuminating the urban vastness that stretched below Robert's mansion. The wind lashed at the windows with unusual force for that time of year. In the library, surrounded by walls of books and technology, Robert reviewed contracts while sipping a rare Cabernet Sauvignon. The rain didn't bother him. On the contrary, it provided an additional sense of isolation. The more intense the storm, the safer he felt in his private refuge. The house's security system was infallible. High-definition cameras monitored every inch of the perimeter, motion sensors detected any unauthorized approach, and the entire complex was watched by an artificial intelligence developed by Robert himself. Nothing entered or left without his knowledge. That's why when the silent alarm vibrated on his smartwatch, indicating movement at the main gate, Robert frowned. He immediately consulted his tablet, which displayed the images from the external cameras. The rain made visibility difficult, but it was possible to distinguish a human figure leaning against the gate. "Enlarge Sector 3, he ordered the house AI. The image expanded, revealing a woman. She was soaked, with simple clothes now clinging to her body. Her dark hair dripped over a face that, even through the rain, seemed determined. The intercom sounded, startling him. Nobody used that intercom. Ever. Hesitantly, Robert activated the communication. "Please." The female voice was almost inaudible under the noise of the storm. "I need help. My car broke down on the road and your gate was the only one I found after walking for almost an hour." Robert remained silent, observing the image. Something about the woman, perhaps the dignity with which she endured the rain, perhaps the tone of voice devoid of panic, aroused his curiosity. "There's a hotel 10 miles from here," he finally replied. "I can call a taxi for you." "I can't afford a hotel," she responded simply. "I just need a place to wait out the storm. A porch, a garage, anything." Robert hesitated. His protocol for unexpected situations was clear. Maintain distance, eliminate unpredictable variables, preserve isolation. But there was something about that woman that intrigued him. "How did you find this address?" he asked, trying to buy time while his mind calculated the risks. "I didn't find any address. I just followed the road to the end after my car stopped. Please, the rain is getting worse." A deafening thunderclap split the sky, as if to confirm her words. The mansion's lights flickered momentarily. The storm was intensifying. Against all his better judgment, against every rule he had established. For himself over the last 15 years, Robert made an impulsive decision. The gate will open partially. Enter and follow the driveway to the main house. He watched on the monitor as she walked slowly through the property. a solitary figure fighting against the wind and rain. There was something almost poetic about that image, an unexpected intruder crossing gardens that no one besides him knew. When the doorbell rang, Robert was already in the entrance hall. He took a deep breath before opening the door, preparing himself for the first real contact with a stranger in his personal space in years. The woman who entered seemed even more fragile up close. Small, with black hair plastered to her tanned face, she couldn't be more than 30 years old. Her clothes, simple jeans and a white shirt now transparent from the water, contrasted with the luxury of the environment. But what most caught Robert's attention were her eyes. Brown deep, they carried a disconcerting mixture of exhaustion and determination. "Thank you," she said, her voice firmer now. "I'm Deborah Fields." "Robert Sullivan," he replied, automatically maintaining distance. "There's a guest bathroom down the hall to the right. You can dry off there. I'll get some towels and clothes." As she headed to the bathroom, leaving a trail of water on the marble floor, Robert tried to process what he had just done. He had broken his own fundamental rule: never let the outside world penetrate his sanctuary. On the very rare occasions when he needed to receive someone, usually technicians for maintenance that couldn't be done, remotely, he scheduled weeks in advance, prepared mentally, and limited access to specific areas of the house. Now a complete stranger was using his guest bathroom. He searched the closet for some emergency items, a basic white shirt and sweatpants with an adjustable drawstring. He hesitated before knocking on the bathroom door, feeling an anxiety he hadn't experienced in a long time. "I left some clothes out here," he announced. "Thank you," came the reply, followed by the sound of the shower being turned on. While waiting in the hallway, Robert was overcome by a strange sensation. His house, always so silent and predictable, now housed another presence, another human being with thoughts, desires, and stories of their own. It was disturbing and somehow fascinating. 20 minutes later, Deborah emerged from the bathroom. The loose clothes on her small body gave her an almost childlike appearance, but there was a dignity in her bearing that contradicted this initial impression. "Sorry for the inconvenience," she said, adjusting the shirt that fell over one of her shoulders. "As soon as the rain lessens, I'll be on my way." "The forecast is that it will last all night," Robert replied, consulting his smartwatch. "There's a guest room on the second floor. You can stay until tomorrow." The words left his mouth before he could fully evaluate their implications. One night, a stranger in his house for an entire night. "Are you sure? I don't want to impose more than I already have." "I'm sure," he confirmed, surprising himself. "Come, I'll show you the room." As they climbed the main staircase, Robert maintained a calculated distance. The guest room was in the opposite wing from his, which provided some comfort. Still, the idea of sharing his space with someone was disconcerting. "It's here," he said, opening the door to a spacious and impersonal room decorated in shades of white and grey. "There's a phone on the table. If you need anything, just dial 0. The house system will answer." Deborah looked around, clearly impressed by the discreet luxury of the environment. "Is this your vacation home or something?" Robert looked at her, confused. "No, it's where I live." "Alone? In this entire mansion?" "Yes." She nodded, as if she had just confirmed something to herself. "It must be quiet." "That's how I prefer it." A moment of silence established itself between them, filled only by the sound of rain against the windows. There was something in the way she observed him without judgment, just with genuine curiosity, that made him uncomfortable. "Well, good night then," he said, retreating to the hallway. "There's a closet with more clothes if you need them, and breakfast will be served at 7. "Served by whom?" she asked with a touch of irony in her voice. "By the kitchen's automated system," he answered, not catching the humor. "Good night, Ms. Fields." "Deborah," she corrected gently. "Just Deborah." Robert nodded stiffly and closed the door, leaving her alone. In the hallway, he leaned against the wall, feeling his heart racing. What was wrong with him? Why had he let that stranger into his life, into his house? The answer, he realized, with discomfort, was that there was something about her that deeply intrigued him, something familiar and at the same time completely new. That night, as the storm battered Chicago, Robert Sullivan lay in his bed and for the first time in years couldn't sleep. The awareness that just a few meters away another person was breathing under his roof was too disturbing. What he didn't know was that that sleepless night would be just the beginning of a much greater transformation than he could imagine. Robert awoke to an aroma he didn't recognize, something warm, comforting, that seemed to evoke memories he didn't know he possessed. Confused, he checked the clock. 6:40 a.m. The kitchen's automated system should only start at 7 a.m., and it never produced such human aromas. He got up, put on his robe, and descended the stairs cautiously. As he approached the kitchen, other senses were awakened, the low sound of a melody, classic folk music, he realized, and the soft noise of someone humming. He stopped at the entrance, stunned by the scene. His kitchen, always immaculate and empty, was alive. On the marble counter, scattered flour formed small white clouds. On the central island, cut fruits displayed vibrant colors. And in front of the stove, with her back to him, was Deborah, moving, with the grace of someone who has known that space for years. "Good morning," she said, turning as she sensed his presence. "I hope I haven't crossed any boundaries, but I thought a homemade breakfast would be a good way to thank you for your hospitality." Robert remained at the entrance, torn between the discomfort of seeing his space invaded and a strange fascination with the transformation that had occurred. The kitchen, designed for efficiency, not for the pleasure of cooking, seemed to have found its true vocation. "Where did you find the ingredients?" he finally asked, approaching cautiously. "In the automated pantry. Your system is quite intuitive." She smiled, turning her attention back to the pan where what appeared to be a pancake was browning. "I made coffee the traditional way, not with that complicated machine. I hope you don't mind." Robert sat on one of the high stools, still processing the situation. There was something deeply disconcerting and, at the same time, strangely comforting about this domestic invasion. "Do you always cook like this for strangers?" he asked, watching her serve coffee in cups he didn't even know he owned. "Only for those who shelter me during storms." Deborah placed a steaming cup in front of him. "And cooking calms me. Or it used to calm me." There was something in the way she pronounced the last sentence, a passing shadow in her eyes, that piqued Robert's curiosity. But before he could ask, she continued, "Try it. It's a blend with chocolate notes." Robert took a sip, surprised by the complex flavor. It wasn't just good, it was exceptional. "Where did you learn to make coffee like this?" "I was a chef for many years." She flipped another pancake with skill, specialized in contemporary cuisine with American roots. "Was?" "Yes, past tense." She served a plate with golden pancakes, fresh fruits, and a drizzle of honey. "Now I'm in transition." Robert accepted the plate, still trying to reconcile the image of that woman who had appeared soaked at his door the night before with the confident professional who commanded his kitchen with such naturalness. The first bite transported him to a place he hadn't visited in a long time, the simple and honest pleasure of food made with care. It wasn't just the flavor, it was the complete experience, the aroma, the texture, the unpretentious but elegant presentation. "This is extraordinary," he admitted, surprised by his own sincerity. Deborah smiled, a genuine smile that illuminated her face in a way that made Robert look away, suddenly uncomfortable with the intimacy of the moment. "Thank you. It's good to know I haven't lost my touch." She served herself and sat on the other side of the counter, maintaining a respectful distance. For a few minutes they ate in silence, only the sound of the low music filling the environment. "So," she began, breaking the silence, "what makes a man like you live alone in a house this size?" The question, direct and personal, caught Robert off guard. Under normal circumstances, he would have deflected the subject or simply withdrawn. But there was something about Deborah's presence, perhaps the straightforward way she occupied the space without judgments, that made him respond with more sincerity than he had planned. "I prefer silence and control. People bring complications. And yet you let me in. It wasn't a question, but a statement that carried an implicit question. Why? It was the storm, he answered, knowing it wasn't the whole truth. No one deserves to be in that downpour. Deborah studied him for a moment, as if she could see beyond the superficial answer, but she didn't press. And you? Robert asked, surprising himself with the genuine interest. What brought you to this road during a storm? A shadow crossed her face again, more evident this time. I'm returning to Virginia. Or going. I haven't decided yet. She stirred her coffee, thoughtful. Sometimes you need to take a few steps back to find the way forward. There was something in the way she spoke, direct without self-pity, that resonated with Robert. That woman carried her own scars, he now realized. They weren't as evident as his. They hadn't transformed her into a recluse, but they were there, in the small pauses between words, in the way her eyes occasionally lost focus. Your car, he suddenly remembered. How you said it broke down on the road. Yes, an old Honda, but a valiant one until yesterday. I can send someone to check it. I have contacts with specialized repair shops. The offer came naturally, surprising him. Since when did he care about a stranger's car? That would be very kind, she thanked him. But I don't want any more inconveniences. I've already abused your hospitality too much. It's not an inconvenience. Robert picked up his tablet, making some notes. I'll arrange. That today, meanwhile, well, you can stay if you want. The words came out before he could contain them, impulsive and irrational. Deborah stared at him, surprised, and for a moment he wanted to withdraw the invitation, return to the safety of his solitary routine. Are you sure? She asked cautiously. You don't seem like the type of person who invites strangers for extended stays. I'm not, he confirmed, but you cook well. The justification was ridiculous, and they both knew it. Deborah laughed, a crystalline sound that echoed through the kitchen and somehow seemed to make the environment warmer. A fair exchange then, lodging for home cooking. Robert nodded, trying to ignore the strange sensation in his chest, something between anxiety and a type of excitement he hadn't experienced in years. Just until your car is fixed, he clarified, more to himself than to her. Of course, Deborah agreed with a small smile. Just until then. The rest of the morning passed. In a surprisingly comfortable dynamic, Robert worked in his office, connecting remotely to the company, while Deborah explored the property with an almost childlike curiosity. Through the security cameras, he observed her occasionally, intrigued by the way she seemed marveled by details that he had long ignored. The movement of leaves in the garden, the design of an old bench under a tree, the sunset reflected in the artificial lake. Around 3 in the afternoon, he was interrupted by a notification. Deborah was at the office door. Come in, he said, turning off the monitor that showed her in the garden, suddenly embarrassed for having observed her. She entered carrying a tray with coffee and what appeared to be freshly baked cheese rolls. I thought you might need a break, she explained, placing the tray on a side table. You haven't left here all morning. The gesture, simple and considerate, disconcerted him. How long had it been since someone had cared about his well-being in such an unpretentious way? Thank you, he murmured, feeling awkward. You didn't have to. I know I didn't have to, I wanted to. She observed the office with polite interest. What exactly do you work with? Technology, app development. What kind of apps? Robert hesitated. Talking about Connect Sun was talking about himself, about his own limitations and fears. A communication app, he replied vaguely, for people who prefer limited contact. Like you, she observed without judgment. Like me, he confirmed, surprising himself with his own honesty. Deborah nodded, as if she had just connected some pieces. It must be a good app, considering. She gestured to the mansion around them. All this. It's popular, he admitted. Many people prefer to maintain distance without losing connection. Interesting how someone who values isolation so much created a way for people to connect. The observation, insightful and accurate, caught Robert off guard. It had been so long since someone had intellectually challenged him in this way. Perhaps it's easier to understand what people want when you share the same needs, he replied, again surprising himself with his frankness. Deborah smiled, a gentle smile that contained neither pity nor judgment. "I'll let you work," she said, walking to the door. "Dinner will be at 8 if you're interested." When she left, Robert remained motionless for a long moment, absorbing what had just happened. In less than 24 hours, his meticulously constructed routine had been completely altered. His house, once a sterile and controlled space, now had aromas, music, and the unpredictable presence of another person. The most disturbing thing was that, against all expectations, he didn't hate it. At night, as he headed to the dining room, a room he rarely used, Robert realized that for the first time in years he was genuinely curious about what awaited him. And this curiosity, this small opening to the unpredictable, was perhaps the most significant transformation of all. 3 days had passed since Deborah's arrival. The car, according to the mechanic contacted by Robert, would need a specific part that would take a week to arrive. Under normal circumstances, this news would have been met with irritation by Robert, an intruder in his house for longer than anticipated. But to his own surprise, he found himself almost relieved. Deborah's presence had brought a vitality that his mansion had never known. Meals, once functional and solitary, became events he looked forward to with anticipation. The kitchen, previously a utilitarian space, had transformed into the beating heart of the house, and the gardens, which he had always viewed through windows or monitors, were now explored daily in walks that were initially awkward, but gradually became moments of surprisingly easy conversation. On that sunny Thursday morning, Robert observed Deborah from the terrace as she examined the herb garden she had discovered at the back of the property, an abandoned structure that he barely remembered having built. "This is a crime!" she shouted upon seeing him, gesturing to the neglected beds. "Do you know how much potential there is here? Basil, rosemary, thyme, everything could be growing in this soil." Robert approached, strangely enchanted by her indignation. There was something invigorating about the way Deborah cared about things he barely noticed. "Feel free to revitalize it," he offered, surprising himself with his own generosity. "I can provide whatever is necessary." The smile she gave him did something strange to his chest, a warmth that spread quickly and left him momentarily speechless. "Really? That would be wonderful. We could have fresh herbs for dinner and—" She stopped, embarrassed. "Sorry, I'm getting carried away as if I were going to stay here forever." "It's no problem," he said more softly than he intended. The garden did need someone who cared about it. They returned to the house side by side, in a comfortable silence that would have been unthinkable days ago. In the entrance hall, Deborah took an elastic band from her wrist to tie back her hair, and it was then that Robert noticed something he hadn't noticed before: a colorful, handmade bracelet made of beads. That bracelet. Something about it awakened a distant memory, something buried so deep that he didn't even know it still existed. While Deborah spoke animatedly about plans for the garden, Robert remained motionless, his eyes fixed on the object. "That bracelet," he interrupted, his voice strangely hoarse. "Where did you get it?" Deborah stopped, surprised by the abrupt question. Instinctively, she touched the colorful beads. It's a childhood memento." She hesitated, as if deciding how much to reveal. "From an accident, actually." Robert felt the blood freeze in his veins. It wasn't possible. It would be too much of a coincidence. What kind of accident? Something in his tone must have alerted Deborah. She studied him intently before answering. "When I was 8 years old, a boy ran over me with a bicycle in Richmond. Nothing serious, just a cut behind my ear, but—" She pushed back her hair, revealing a small pale scar. "The boy was so frightened that he gave me this bracelet. He said it was his lucky charm." Robert's world seemed to spin. The mathematical probabilities, the algorithms that governed his understanding of reality, all seemed insufficient to explain that moment. "Monroe Park," he murmured, almost inaudibly. "Near the carousel." Deborah's eyes widened. "How do you know that?" "Because I was the boy on the bicycle." Time seemed to freeze between them. Deborah stared at him with an expression impossible to decipher: surprise, disbelief, and something else he couldn't name. "No," she whispered finally. "It can't be." "The bracelet had a secret compartment," continued Robert, the memories coming back in a cascade now. "A small cavity where I kept a note, an apology that I never had the courage to deliver." Deborah's hands trembled slightly as she manipulated the bracelet, finding the hidden mechanism that even she didn't seem to know existed. A small compartment opened, and from inside she removed a folded piece of paper, yellowed by time but still intact. With trembling fingers, she unfolded the paper. The childish handwriting, carefully formed, simply said, "Sorry for the injury. I hope you get well, Robert." When she looked up, there were tears in her eyes. "All these years, and I never knew there was a note." Robert sat down, suddenly weak. The implications of that encounter, the infinitesimal probabilities of that coincidence were overwhelming. "How?" he asked, unable to formulate a more complex question. Deborah sat beside him, still holding the small note as if it were something precious. "I lived in Richmond with my parents. We were visiting the park that day. After the accident, I never saw you again." She hesitated. "The bracelet became important to me, a reminder that even in difficult moments, there can be kindness." "I thought about you for weeks," admitted Robert, his voice low. "I wanted to know if you were okay, if the scar had disappeared, but I never had the courage to return to the park to look for you. And now, more than 25 years later, you appear at my door." The silence that followed was loaded with meaning, as if the universe had meticulously planned that improbable reunion. "What happened to you afterward?" Deborah finally asked. "After the accident?" Robert hesitated. Talking about his past wasn't something he did frequently, or ever, but something about the extraordinary situation they found themselves in seemed to demand honesty. "We moved to Chicago the following year. My father got a better job here. I grew up as a shy boy, interested in computers and programming. And you?" "I stayed in Richmond until I was 20. I always loved cooking. My grandmother was a Southern woman, one of those who did everything in the kitchen while singing. I studied culinary arts, worked in increasingly larger restaurants until..." She stopped, the same shadow that Robert had already noticed before crossing her face. "Until..." Deborah took a deep breath. "Until I became the executive chef of an award-winning restaurant in New York. I had everything: recognition, money, a talented team. And then..." She involuntarily touched the scar behind her ear. "I discovered something that changed everything." Robert waited, feeling that he shouldn't press. "A rare neurological condition," she continued finally. "It started with tremors in my hands. For a chef, that's..." She left the sentence unfinished, but it wasn't necessary to complete it. "The doctors gave me options, experimental treatments, but the restaurant couldn't wait. I was replaced. Suddenly, everything I had worked for simply disappeared. And now I'm in treatment. Experimental, expensive, but promising. The tremors are controlled, but..." She shrugged. "The world of high-end cuisine doesn't forgive weaknesses. Nobody wants to hire a chef who might, at any moment, lose control of their hands." The vulnerability in her confession touched Robert in a way he hadn't expected. Here was someone who, like him, carried scars, some visible, others not. But unlike him, Deborah hadn't hidden from the world. "Is that why you were on the road? Going back to Virginia?" "Yes. I thought that maybe, returning to my roots, I could find a new path, something smaller, more personal. A cafe, perhaps, something mine." Robert nodded, understanding more than he could express. "And you?" She asked. "How did you go from shy boy to..." She gestured to the mansion around them. "All this?" It was Robert's turn to hesitate. His story wasn't easy to share, especially the part about Caroline, about the betrayal that had led him to completely close himself off. "I studied computer science. I had a facility with programming, especially interfaces, and I realized early on that there were many people like me, people who wanted connection without vulnerability. Connect Sun was born from that perception, and success came quickly, more than I could have imagined. Suddenly I had a company valued in billions, and the more successful I became, the more I could isolate myself. Sounds lonely, she observed. Softly. It's controllable, he corrected. Or it was, until you appeared at my door. The confession, though subtle, didn't go unnoticed. Deborah smiled, a gentle smile that warmed something inside Robert. You know what's strange, she asked. I always kept this bracelet because I felt it protected me somehow, as if the boy who gave it to me, even without knowing, was looking after me from a distance. The idea was so sentimental, so opposite to everything Robert had become, that his first reaction was to dismiss it. But there was something about it, something about the improbable connection they shared, that made him reconsider. Maybe. I was, he finally said, surprised by his own words. That night, as they dined on the veranda under a starry sky, something had changed between them. It wasn't just the discovery of the connection from the past, but something new, something growing in the present, a trust that Robert didn't know he was still capable of feeling. As Deborah told stories of her culinary adventures around the world, laughing and gesturing with hands that had once trembled uncontrollably, Robert realized he was smiling. Not the restrained smile he reserved for video conferences, but something genuine, something that came from a place he thought was lost, forever. What neither of them knew was that miles away at Sullivan Tech's central office, Victoria Matthews observed with growing concern Robert's repeated online absences. Something was wrong, and Victoria, driven by her own secret agenda, was determined to discover what or who was interfering with the plans she had cultivated for years. Victoria Matthews walked through the mirrored corridors of Sullivan Tech with the determination of a predator. Her high heels echoed on the marble floor as employees averted their gaze, recognizing that expression that always preceded corporate storms. Something was wrong with Robert. In the last 2 weeks, he had cancelled 3 important meetings, responded to messages with unacceptable delays, and, most alarmingly, approved a project he had explicitly rejected before. She entered her spacious office on the top floor, with a view of Michigan Avenue, and closed the door with more force than necessary. It wasn't just a professional matter. In 8 years of partnership, she had meticulously built her relationship with Robert, gaining his business trust while secretly nurturing feelings that went far beyond professional. Victoria knew Robert better than anyone. She knew his habits, his quirks, his fears. She knew how he operated, how he made decisions, how he isolated himself from the world. And she knew, with the certainty that came from years of patient observation, that something or someone had penetrated the fortress he had built around himself. Locate Robert Sullivan, she ordered the private security system she maintained, independent of the company's official protocols. The screen on her desk lit up, showing a city map with a blinking dot. The mansion in Hillcrest. Robert rarely stayed home during business hours. Something was definitely wrong. Find any recent anomalies, visitors, deliveries, unusual communications. The system processed the command for a few seconds. Unidentified. Vehicle detected on the property 10 days ago. A 1998 Honda Civic, partially visible license plate. A car? On Robert's property? That was unprecedented. Robert didn't receive visits, much less allow unknown vehicles to enter his property. Show external security images of the mansion, last 10 days. The images appeared on the screen. The imposing mansion seen from afar, the meticulously maintained gardens and... Victoria narrowed her eyes. A female figure in the gardens. In the following days, more images. The same woman on the veranda walking beside Robert, the two of them talking on the terrace. The sensation that ran through Victoria's body was primitive, visceral. A toxic mixture of jealousy, anger, and fear. In 8 years, Robert had never shown the slightest interest in any woman. She had waited patiently, planning each move, knowing that eventually he would need human connection and she would be there, the only person he trusted. And now, this stranger. Identify the woman in the images, she ordered, her voice trembling slightly. The system worked for a few minutes, cross-referencing facial recognition data with public databases. Probable identification: Deborah Fields, 33 years old, chef, last registered position, executive chef at Origins Restaurant, New York City until 8 months ago. Chef. Victoria almost laughed at the irony. Robert, who barely cared about what he ate, seduced by a cook. But there was something more, something that didn't fit. Deepen the search. I want everything about Deborah Fields. Professional history, personal, medical, everything. While the system worked, Victoria poured herself a drink. The feeling of control slipping through her fingers was unbearable. She hadn't gotten to where she was, COO of one of the largest technology companies in the country, by accepting defeats. And there was more at stake than just her frustrated relationship with Robert. Much more. Her tablet beeped, indicating that the deep search was complete. Victoria's eyes scanned the information, absorbing every detail with predatory avidity. Deborah Fields, born in Richmond, Virginia, daughter of university professors. Graduated in culinary arts, rising career in restaurants in Boston and New York. Awarded as breakthrough chef 3 years ago. And then the fall. Sudden departure from Origins Restaurant 8 months earlier. Official reason: personal issues. Real reason. Victoria smiled as she read the illegally obtained medical record: focal dystonia, a neurological condition that caused tremors in the hands, fatal for a chef's career. But what really captured her attention was a financial detail: significant monthly deposits in Deborah's account, coming from a digital marketing company called Artemis Connections. A quick verification revealed that Artemis specialized in a very specific type of service: strategic connections with high-profile executives. In direct language, they provided attractive and intelligent women to approach wealthy men, usually for purposes of corporate espionage or blackmail. It was perfect, too perfect. Victoria leaned back in her chair, a strategy already forming in her mind. It didn't matter if the connection with Artemis was real or if it could be fabricated to appear real. The important thing was that now she had a weapon. She picked up the phone, hesitated for a moment, and then dialed Robert's private number. He answered on the 4th ring, something unusual for someone normally so quick and efficient. Victoria. Any problem? There was something different in his voice, a lightness she had never heard before. We need to talk, she said, keeping her voice professional. In person. It's about Project Nexus. Project Nexus was their private code for extremely confidential matters, something they knew Robert couldn't. Ignore. A sigh from the other end of the line. Can it be tomorrow? I'm in the middle of something important here. In the middle of something important. With her. Anger burned in Victoria's throat, but her voice remained calm. It's urgent, Robert. I'm on my way to Hillcrest now. Before he could protest, she hung up. She grabbed her folder, the tablet with the evidence against Deborah, and left the office with the posture of someone who had already won the battle. At the Jai mansion, Robert looked at the phone with a worried expression. Victoria had never come to his house without an explicit invitation. The fact that she was on her way now, invoking the code they had established for emergencies, meant trouble. Something wrong? Deborah's voice brought him back to the present. She was at the library door wearing an apron over one of his shirts, too big for her small body, with flour on her hands. Over the last 10 days, she had transformed not just the kitchen, but the entire house. The windows, previously always closed, now let in sunlight. Soft music played in rooms that were once silent. And Robert himself, to his surprise, had changed. He smiled more, slept better. He had even started working less, dedicating time to showing Deborah the details of the property that he himself barely knew. My partner is coming here, he replied, still holding the phone. It seems to be important. Do you want me to withdraw? Asked Deborah, practical as always. I can stay in the room until she leaves. The question caught him off guard. Why would Deborah need to hide? They weren't doing anything wrong. She was a friend. The word sounded strange even in his thoughts. When was the last time he had a friend? "Don't be ridiculous," he answered, more abruptly than he intended. "This is my house, you're my guest, there's no reason to hide." Deborah smiled, and that smile did something strange in Robert's chest, a warm, expansive feeling that he couldn't name. "In that case, I'll finish. That naturally leavened bread. If you need coffee or something to eat during the meeting, just let me know." She left, leaving behind a slight aroma of yeast and herbs. Robert found himself smiling involuntarily before remembering that Victoria was on her way. Victoria, with her perceptive gaze that always seemed to see through him. Victoria, who knew his secrets, his fears, his history with Caroline. Victoria, who would never approve of Deborah's presence in his life. An hour later, the security system announced her arrival. Robert personally opened the door, another new habit inspired by Deborah, who insisted that doors should be opened by people, not machines. Victoria entered like a blast of icy wind, all in black, her expensive perfume preceding her. Her eyes scanned the entrance hall, immediately noticing the small changes. Fresh flowers in a vase, a pair of feminine flats discreetly placed in a corner, a light jacket hanging on the coat rack. "I see you have company," she commented, her tone falsely light. "A friend is temporarily staying," Robert replied, trying to sound casual. "Shall we go to the office?" Victoria's eyes narrowed slightly, but she followed him in silence. On the way to the office, they passed by the kitchen, where Deborah was working concentratedly, softly humming while shaping dough. "You must be Victoria," said Deborah, looking up with a smile. "Robert talks a lot about you." It was a gentle lie. Robert had rarely mentioned Victoria, and when he had, it was only in a professional context. Victoria responded with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Interesting. He hasn't mentioned anything about you." The icy tone didn't go unnoticed. Deborah, however, maintained her smile. "We met recently, or rather, we reunited." Something in the choice of words made Victoria cast a questioning look at Robert, who merely gestured toward the office, anxious to get her away from Deborah. Once in the office with the door closed, Victoria wasted no time. "Who is she, Robert? And please don't tell me she's just a friend." There was a presumptuous intimacy in her question that bothered him. "That's exactly what she is. A friend. Her car broke down during that heavy storm, she needed shelter, and we ended up discovering that we have a connection from the past." "A connection from the past." Victoria repeated the words as if testing their flavor. "How convenient." "What does that mean?" In response, Victoria opened her tablet and placed it on the desk. "It means that you, one of the richest and most reserved men in the country, suddenly shelters in your home a woman who, coincidentally, has connections with a company specialized in strategic approaches." Robert looked at the screen, seeing documents, bank statements, photos. His analytical brain tried to process the information, while his heart, an organ he rarely consulted, refused to believe. "What are you talking about?" "I'm talking about your friend Deborah Fields receiving monthly payments from Artemis Connections, a company known for providing attractive women to approach influential men." Victoria paused dramatically. "In other words, Robert, you're being manipulated by a professional con artist." The words hit Robert like a physical punch. Images of the last 10 days passed through his mind. Deborah cooking, smiling, telling stories of her childhood in Virginia, listening attentively while he, for the first time in years, talked about his own dreams and fears. The bracelet, the scar, the improbable connection of their childhoods, all an elaborate lie? "This doesn't make sense," he murmured, more to himself than to Victoria. How would she know about the bicycle accident? About the bracelet? "Robert." Victoria's voice softened, becoming almost maternal. "People like her research their targets meticulously. They find details, stories, weaknesses. They create narratives that seem impossible to fabricate." She moved closer, placing a hand on his arm, an unusual gesture between them. "I know you want to believe her. I know that loneliness can be difficult to bear. But you've built something too big to risk everything for a fantasy." Robert looked again at the tablet, at the documents that seemed to confirm every word of Victoria's. The seed of doubt, planted with surgical precision, was beginning to germinate. Why would she do this? He asked, his voice low. What would she gain? Information about Sullivan Tech's next launch? Access to your accounts? A place in your will? Victoria shrugged. The possibilities are endless when it comes to a man with your assets. Robert stepped away, walking to the window. Outside, the garden that previously seemed so lifeless now displayed vibrant colors, the result of Deborah's small interventions, who had insisted that a garden needs to look alive, not just organized. Had it all been part of the plan? Every smile, every conversation, every moment of apparent vulnerability. I need to think, he finally said. Of course, Victoria collected her tablet, satisfied with having planted the seed. But don't take too long. The longer she stays, the harder it will be to perceive the manipulation. When Victoria left, Robert remained motionless, his carefully reconstructed world now crumbling around him. The rational part of his brain analyzed the evidence, calculated probabilities, looked for patterns. The coincidence was too improbable. The way Deborah had appeared during a storm, how she had quickly integrated into his life, how she had seemed to know exactly what to say and do to break down his defenses. But there was also that other part, the part that had felt something awaken after so many dormant years. The part that for the first time since Caroline had begun to believe that perhaps, just perhaps, genuine human connection was possible. As these two parts battled within him, Robert didn't notice the silent figure retreating from the office. Teresa, a door that had been left ajar enough for Deborah, bringing coffee that no one had asked for, to hear enough to understand that her time in that house had come to an end. Night fell over the Hillcrest mansion, bringing with it an oppressive silence that not even the ambient sound system could alleviate. Robert remained in his office for hours, examining and re-examining the documents left by Victoria, looking for flaws, inconsistencies, anything that could disprove the narrative she had presented. The deposits were real, monthly transfers from Artemis connections to Deborah's account. The dates coincided with her departure from Origin's restaurant. The company, after some research, really had the reputation Victoria mentioned, specialized in strategic connections with powerful men. But there was something that didn't fit, something in the equation that his analytical brain couldn't reconcile. The bracelet, the scar, the shared memory of a day in Monroe Park in Richmond, 25 years ago. Even the most meticulous research couldn't fabricate that. Or could it? When he finally left the office, the house was too quiet. No aroma coming from the kitchen, no soft music, no sign of the presence that had, in recent days, transformed his fortress into something almost like a home. "Deborah?" he called, his voice echoing through the empty corridors. No response. An unpleasant premonition led him to the guest room. The door was ajar. Inside, the bed was made, the surfaces clean, no personal sign in sight. On the nightstand, a white envelope with his name written in an elegant handwriting. His hands trembled slightly as he opened the envelope. Inside, a single sheet of paper. "Robert, I heard enough of your conversation with Victoria to understand that my presence is now a source of distrust. I won't stay where I'm not welcome, nor where my integrity is questioned. To clarify, I had never heard of this Artemis company until today. If there are deposits in my account, they have another explanation, one that you might discover if you look beyond appearances. I leave with you the notebook in the drawer, my recipes, some reflections, things I wrote during my days here. Perhaps reading it, you'll find more truth than in your partner's documents. The taxi is already on its way. Don't worry about my car, I'll find another way. Thank you for the days of shelter. For a moment, I thought that maybe, but it doesn't matter now." Deborah. Robert sat on the bed, feeling strangely empty. He opened the drawer mentioned in the letter and found a simple notebook, bound in worn leather. The first pages contained detailed recipes, noted in the same elegant handwriting as the letter, As he progressed, the recipes gave way to personal reflections. Day 3 in the house of the bicycle boy. I still can't believe the coincidence. Or perhaps it's not a coincidence. Mom always said the universe has its own plans. Day 5. I cooked Southern-style beans today. R's smile when he tried it. He looked like a child discovering something new. How can someone with so much live with so little? Day 7. The tremors returned briefly today. I hid my hands until it passed. I don't want him to see this weakness. Not yet. Robert continued reading, page after page of observations, recipes, small daily joys recorded with an honesty that would be impossible to fabricate. On the last entry, dated that same day, he found, "Something is changing between us, I can feel it. Last night, when we looked at the stars from the terrace, our fingers touched for a moment. Neither of us pulled away. I'm afraid. Afraid of feeling something I shouldn't. Afraid that when he discovers the whole truth about my condition, about the limitations I'll face, everything will change. Yeah, it's better not to create expectations, but it's hard not to dream when for the first time in so long I feel at home." The last words hit Robert like a physical blow. I feel at home. It was exactly how he too had felt in recent days, as if his cold, impersonal mansion had finally become a home. He rose abruptly, a sudden determination taking hold of him. He couldn't let her leave like this, based only on Victoria's insinuations. He needed the truth, the complete story. System: locate the last taxi that left the property. Destination: taxi requested at 6:42 p.m. Destination: Hillcrest Plaza. Hotel downtown. Robert was already heading to the garage when his phone rang. It was Victoria again. "I hope you've reflected on our conversation," she said without preamble. "I'm leaving, Victoria. We'll talk later." "Leaving? Where to?" "I need to clarify some things with Deborah." There was a tense pause on the other end of the line. "She's already gone then. Good. Means she has some common sense." "Or that she heard your conspiracy theory and felt insulted," he retorted, anger growing. "Why did you do this, Victoria? Why investigate her? Why bring these proofs to me?" "Because I care about you." Her voice rose an octave. "Because I can't stand to see you being manipulated." "Is that so? Or is there something more, something you're not telling me?" Another pause, longer this time. "What are you talking about?" "I'm talking about control, about how you've always wanted to control me, how you've never accepted that. I maintain distance, how you insist on crossing boundaries I've clearly established. This is absurd. We're just partners, friends." Then as a friend, answer, "Why did you investigate Deborah?" "I already said, to protect you." "And Artemis Connections. What exactly did you discover about this company?" Hesitation, almost imperceptible, but there it was. "It's an agency for sophisticated escorts, women trained to seduce wealthy men." "Interesting, because I just researched it, and Artemis Connections is a subsidiary of the Neurological Institute Foundation of Chicago. They make payments to patients in experimental treatments." The silence on the other end of the line confirmed what Robert already suspected. "You manipulated those documents," he continued, his voice dangerously calm now. "You created a narrative to drive me away from her. The question is why?" "Robert, you're not thinking clearly." "I'm thinking more clearly than I have in years. I'm going to find Deborah now, and when I return, you and I will have a long conversation about the future of our partnership." He hung up before she could respond, tossed the phone onto the passenger seat, and accelerated down the road that led to downtown Hillcrest. The Hillcrest Plaza Hotel was a modest establishment, mainly frequented by executives on business trips. At the reception, a young attendant recognized him immediately. Robert Sullivan's face, though rarely seen in public, was famous enough to be instantly identifiable. "Mr. Sullivan, it's an honor. How can we help you?" "I'm looking for a guest. Deborah Fields, she arrived recently." The attendant consulted the system, frowning. "I'm sorry, sir, we don't have any Deborah Fields registered." Robert felt his stomach sink. "Are you sure she took a taxi here less than an hour ago?" "Let me check again." A few more clicks on the keyboard. "No, sir, no record. Perhaps she went to another hotel." Frustration and concern grew in equal Measure. Where could Deborah have gone? Without a car, with few resources, in a city she didn't know well. It was then that he remembered. There was one more page in the notebook that he hadn't finished reading, a loose sheet inserted between the last pages. He returned to the car, picked up the notebook and found the paper. It was a business card for a bed and breakfast in Lakewood, about 40 minutes from Hillcrest. On the back, a handwritten note. "Deb, if you need a place, call me. I always have a room for you. Teresa." It was a chance. The only one he had. The trip to Lakewood seemed endless, despite the empty road at that hour. While driving, Robert reflected on the last days, on how Deborah's presence had changed something fundamental inside him. It wasn't just the company. It wasn't just the improbable connection of their childhoods. It was the way she saw him, not as the reclusive billionaire, not as the technological genius, but simply as Robert, the bicycle boy who had grown up surrounded by walls that he himself had built. The Solar Inn, as indicated on the card, was in a wooded area away from the center, a welcoming two-story building with wooden porches and a well-maintained garden. Even at that late hour, the lights were on, and a gray-haired lady was attending the reception. "Good evening," greeted Robert, trying to control the anxiety in his voice. "I'm looking for Deborah Fields. I believe she may be staying here." Lady Teresa, he presumed, examined him with astute eyes. "And you would be." "Robert Sullivan, I'm a friend." "Friend." She repeated the word as if testing its veracity. "Well, Mr. Sullivan, Deborah is indeed staying with us. She arrived a few hours ago, quite upset, said she needed time to think." "I need to see her, please." Teresa studied him for a few more moments as if assessing his intentions. "Room 7, end of the hallway on the right. But if she doesn't want to see you, respect that. Understood?" Robert nodded, grateful for the woman's understanding. The hallway was silent, illuminated only by indirect lights at the baseboards. He stopped in front of room 7, his heart racing in a way he hadn't experienced since adolescence. He took a deep breath and knocked. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then soft footsteps approached, and the door opened. Deborah seemed smaller, more fragile, dressed in simple clothes that weren't hers, probably borrowed from Teresa. Her eyes were slightly red, the only visible indication that she might have cried. "Robert," there was no surprise in her voice, just a certain resignation. "May I come in?" She hesitated, then stepped aside, allowing his passage. The room was small but cozy, with a window that looked out onto the garden, now dark. "How did you find me?" she asked, sitting on the edge of the bed. "Your notebook, the inn's card." Deborah nodded, as if that explained everything. "Why did you come, Robert?" The question, direct and straightforward, caught him off guard. Why had he come? What did he hope to accomplish? "Because you left without explanations. Because I need to know the truth." "The truth?" She gave a sad smile. "The truth is that I don't work for any sophisticated escort agency. The truth is that Bracelet really was a gift from a frightened boy after a bicycle accident 25 years ago. The truth is that I have a neurological disease that is being experimentally treated by the Neurological Institute Foundation, which, apparently, uses a company called Artemis to process payments to research participants." She raised her hands, which trembled slightly. "This is my truth, Robert. I'm not perfect, I'm not a con artist. I'm just a chef who lost her career and is trying to rebuild her life." Robert felt the weight of guilt, of shame for having doubted, even if briefly. He took a step forward, then stopped, uncertain if his touch would be welcome. "Why didn't you tell me about the tremors from the beginning? And give you one more reason to see me as someone fragile, needy? No." She shook her head. "I wanted you to see me as an equal, as someone capable." "I do," he said, his voice softer than he intended. "I see you, Deborah, and I'm sorry for having doubted even for a moment." He approached, sitting beside her on the bed, still maintaining a respectful distance. Victoria manipulated those documents. She created a narrative that she knew would affect me, that would touch my deepest insecurities. Why? Why would she do that? Robert sighed, the understanding finally clear in his mind. Because she wants control. Over me, over the company, over everything. And because, he hesitated, embarrassed, because I think she has feelings for me, feelings that I will never reciprocate. Deborah studied him for a long moment, her eyes searching for something in his. And why would you never reciprocate? It was the question Robert had been avoiding asking himself for years. The answer, however, came more easily than he expected. Because I've never felt for her what I feel when I'm with you. The words hung between them, loaded with a meaning that neither was fully ready to articulate. Deborah lowered her gaze, her restless hands in her lap. Robert, there's something I need to tell you. Something that might change how you see me. What? She took a deep breath, like someone preparing for a leap in the dark. The doctors aren't sure if the treatment will work long-term. There's a possibility that the tremors will worsen over time, that I may never be able to cook professionally again, that I might need assistance. Her voice faltered on the last word, and Robert understood the weight of that confession for someone so independent, so proud of her abilities. I'm telling you this, she continued, because I don't want there to be secrets between us, because if what's happening between us continues, you need to know what you're getting into. Robert felt something expand in his chest, an emotion so large, so overwhelming, that for a moment he feared it might consume him. Without thinking, he extended his hand and took hers, tremors and all. You know what I see when I look at you, Deborah? I see courage, I see strength, I see someone who, faced with the loss of everything she built, found a new way to continue, while He shook his head. I hid. I built walls. I created an empire based on the fear of connection. His fingers naturally intertwined with hers. If there's anyone here who doesn't deserve the other, it's me who doesn't deserve you. Deborah's eyes filled with tears, but there was a smile forming on her lips. We're quite a pair, aren't we, the recluse and the chef with trembling hands? An improbable combination, he agreed, feeling lighter than he had in years, but maybe that's exactly what we both need. Slowly, as if afraid of breaking something precious, Robert leaned in. His lips found hers in a soft, hesitant kiss, full of unspoken promises. When they pulled apart, both were smiling. Shall we go home? He asked. Yes, Deborah answered, and in that single word was all the certainty that both had sought for so long. Let's go home. 6 months had passed since the night at the Solar Inn. Chicago's winter gave way to an especially vibrant spring, as if nature itself was celebrating the transformations that had occurred during that period. The mansion in Hillcrest, once a symbol of isolation, now pulsed with life. Windows remained open, allowing the breeze to circulate freely. The gardens, revitalized by caring hands, displayed colors that were previously only theoretical in the property's monochromatic palette. And the herb garden, oh the herb garden, a true oasis of aromatic herbs, organic vegetables and edible flowers that were the delight of the dishes coming from the kitchen. Robert observed this external transformation as a reflection of the revolution that had occurred within him. Sitting on the terrace that had become his favorite work location, he was finalizing a video conference with the development team. So it's confirmed? We're launching Connect Sensitive next quarter? Asked the product director, still visibly impressed with the company's change of direction. Confirmed, Robert replied, a relaxed smile on his face. All tests indicate that the platform is ready. It will be our biggest launch since the original Connect Sun. While the executives discussed final details, Robert glanced toward the garden where Deborah was walking slowly between the beds, gathering herbs for dinner. Her movements were careful, methodical, a necessary adaptation to deal with the tremors that, although controlled by the treatment, still appeared occasionally. Observing her like this, absorbed in a task she loved, brought Robert a sense of fulfillment he had never imagined possible. In recent months, they had built together a routine that respected both his desire for structure and her need for creativity. A delicate balance, but surprisingly natural. Mr. Sullivan, any final comments? The marketing director's voice brought him back to the meeting. Just that I'm proud of everyone's work. Connect Sensitive isn't just a new product, it's a new direction for Sullivan Tech, one that recognizes that technology should serve genuine human connection, not replace it. After final thanks, Robert ended the call and closed his laptop. He descended the steps leading to the garden, approaching Deborah silently, who still hadn't noticed him. "Basil for the sauce?" he asked, making her turn with a small start. "For the pesto," she corrected, smiling, "and rosemary for the lamb. We have important guests tonight, remember?" How could he forget? The official opening of Roots, the small restaurant they had opened together in downtown Hillcrest, would happen that night. An intimate space with only 12 tables where Deborah could exercise her culinary art at her own pace without the pressure of commercial high-end cuisine. "How do you feel?" he asked, noticing a subtle tension in her shoulders. Nervous, excited, terrified. She laughed, a crystalline sound that still made Robert's heart race. "It's the first time I've cooked professionally since..." She didn't need to complete it. Since the diagnosis, since she had lost her position at Origins, since her life had taken a completely unexpected turn. "You're going to shine," he said, touching her face gently. "You've already proven it in the tastings, in the test menu, in every meal you've prepared here." Deborah nodded, leaning against his hand in a gesture of trust that still deeply moved him. "It's different now," she admitted. "Before, I cooked to impress critics, to maintain stars, to compete. Now," she paused, searching for the words, "now I cook to connect people, to create memories. And there's no one better at that than you." They walked back to the house together, talking about the final preparations for the night. Roots was more than a restaurant. It was a symbol of the new path they had both chosen. For Deborah, it represented a reconnection with her passion on terms that respected her limitations. For Robert, it was a courageous step out of his comfort zone, an investment not only financial, but emotional. In the kitchen, Teresa, the owner of the Solar Inn, who had become a close friend, was already working on the initial preparations. "Finally, you two appear. We have 1,000 things to finalize before the opening." Her tone of false irritation barely concealed the affection she felt for the couple. "Robert, I need you to pick up the flowers." Deborah, the restaurant staff, called. "The reservation system has already registered full occupancy for the next 2 weeks." The following hours passed in a whirlwind of activity. While Deborah and Teresa finalized some dishes that would be transported directly to the restaurant, Robert took care of logistics, making calls, confirming details, ensuring that everything was perfect for the most important night of the new phase of their lives. Around 5 in the afternoon, as they prepared to leave, the security system announced the arrival of an unexpected visitor. Dr. Marcus Almeida at the main entrance. Robert and Deborah exchanged surprised looks. Deborah's neurologist wasn't among the opening's guests, at least not officially. "Accept entry," Robert authorized. Minutes later, the doctor, a middle-aged man with youthful energy that contrasted with his gray hair, entered the room carrying a folder and an enigmatic smile. "Sorry to appear without warning," he began, greeting both warmly, "but I received the results of Deborah's latest tests this morning, and I thought you'd like to know immediately." Deborah instinctively grabbed Robert's hand, her body tense with apprehension. "And?" she asked, her voice barely disguising the fear. The doctor's smile widened. "The experimental treatment is working beyond our expectations. The neural degeneration has not only been halted, but reversed in about 40% of the affected areas." Robert felt Deborah tremble beside him, but this time it wasn't the symptoms of the disease, it was pure emotion. "This means," she began, unable to complete. "It means that, maintaining the current protocol, we can expect a significant recovery of fine motor function. The tremors will never completely disappear, but they will be manageable in the long term." The doctor paused, his gaze gentle. "In practical terms, Deborah, you can continue cooking. You can continue building your life without fear of accelerated degeneration." The tears came instantly, silent, running down Deborah's face as she absorbed the meaning of those words. Robert wrapped her in his arms, his own vision blurred by emotion. "Thank you for coming personally," he said to the doctor over Deborah's shoulder. "It means a lot." "You're a special case," replied Dr. Marcus, his expression revealing genuine affection, "not only for the impressive clinical results, but for everything you've built together these past months. It's inspiring." After some more technical explanations and recommendations, the doctor said goodbye, promising to visit the restaurant in the coming weeks for a complete meal. When they were alone again, Robert and Deborah remained embraced for a long moment, processing the news that transformed the future of both. "It seems the universe insists on giving us improbable gifts," she murmured against his chest. "Deserved gifts," Robert corrected, kissing the top of her head. "You fought for this. We fought." Teresa reappeared in the room, gently interrupting the moment. "I hate to break the mood, lovebirds, but we have a restaurant to open. The good news can be celebrated with champagne later." The trip to Roots was filled with a different energy, not just the nervous excitement of the opening, but a deep joy, a renewed certainty that they were on the right path. The restaurant, located in a renovated historic house in downtown Hillcrest, was the embodiment of Deborah and Robert's shared vision. The design combined minimalist elegance with coziness, large windows, natural wood, living plants everywhere. The kitchen, visible from the main dining room through a wide opening, was the heart of the space. When they arrived, the staff was already in position, young chefs personally selected by Deborah, many of them promising talents who, for different reasons, hadn't found space in traditional high-end cuisine. "Chef," they greeted in unison, the respect and admiration evident on their faces. Deborah walked among them, checking preparations, adjusting details, sharing words of encouragement. Her hands occasionally trembled, but no one there saw this as weakness. On the contrary, it was a reminder of the resilience that made her not just an excellent cook, but an inspiring leader. While she commanded the kitchen, Robert supervised the final adjustments in the dining room, the perfectly arranged tables, the lights creating an intimate atmosphere, the carefully programmed musical selection. Every detail reflected the harmonious fusion of their personalities, his precision, her creativity. As guests began to arrive, close friends, some specialized journalists, respected chefs from the Chicago culinary scene, Robert felt an emotion he would never have anticipated a year ago, pride in being visible, present, sharing a significant moment with other people. Robert Sullivan socializing. Never thought I'd see that day. The familiar voice made Robert turn. Paul Mendez, his longtime lawyer, and one of the few who could be called a friend before Deborah's arrival, was observing him with an ironic smile. "People change, Paul. Some people, rarely. You, dramatically." Paul indicated the space around them with a broad gesture. "A restaurant, you who used to eat only out of biological necessity. And the reason for this transformation is, in the kitchen," Robert completed, an involuntary smile appearing on his face at the mention of Deborah. "Where she belongs." Paul studied him for a moment, his expression softening. "You're happy. Genuinely happy. It's good to see that, friend." The D&C dining room filled up, animated conversations creating that characteristic buzz of a successful establishment. At 8 o'clock sharp, Robert went up to the small stage set up in a corner of the restaurant. An expectant silence settled. "Good evening and welcome to Roots," he began, surprising himself with his own comfort in front of an audience. This place was born from a storm, literally. Soft laughter ran through the room as he briefly narrated the improbable story of his reunion with Deborah, omitting personal details, but capturing the essence of the journey that had brought them there. "Roots is not just a restaurant," he continued. "It's a philosophy. We believe that food, like technology, should bring people closer, not isolate them. It should create memories, not just satisfy needs. It should tell stories." He gestured for Deborah to join him. She emerged from the kitchen, still wearing her apron, a delicate blush on her cheeks due to the heat and emotion. "And no one tells stories through food better than our chef, Deborah Fields." The applause was warm as she climbed onto the stage, visibly moved. When she spoke, her voice was firm, carrying the confidence of someone who had finally found her place. "The name Roots wasn't chosen by chance," she explained. "It represents our return to origins, to authentic flavors, traditional techniques, genuine connections. But it also represents our belief that, to grow, we need to be firmly planted in something real." Her gaze met Robert's, a silent communication passing between them. "Each dish we'll serve tonight carries a story, from my childhood in Virginia, from the American traditions I love so much, from the people who inspired me, including," she smiled, "a certain bicycle boy who decades later taught me that the most important encounters in life sometimes seem like accidents." The night unfolded like a dream. The dishes, served in a carefully planned sequence, drew sighs and enthusiastic praise. The team worked with coordinated precision, like a finely tuned orchestra. And at the center of it all, Deborah commanded the kitchen with the tranquil authority of someone who had finally reconciled her talent with her limitations. Around midnight, when the last guests were saying goodbye with promises to return, Robert found Deborah on the restaurant's back porch. She was observing the starry sky, a glass of lemon water in her hands, fatigue and satisfaction equally visible on her face. "It was perfect," he said, joining her. "It was real," she corrected, smiling, "with all the small challenges and last-minute adjustments. And that's what makes it special." Robert nodded, deeply understanding what she meant. The sterile perfection he had sought for so long in his life had been replaced by something much more valuable: authenticity, with all its imperfections and surprises. "I have something for you," he said, taking a small box from his pocket. Deborah raised her eyebrows, surprised. "I thought we had agreed not to exchange gifts today. The opening is already gift enough." "It's not exactly a gift, it's more a symbol." She opened the box carefully. Inside, a bracelet of colorful beads, very similar to the one she had worn for so many years, but clearly new. "Robert, this one also has a secret compartment," he explained, showing how to open it, "and it also has a note inside." With slightly trembling fingers, Deborah extracted the small folded paper. Upon opening it, her eyes filled with tears. "Marry me?" Just like that. 2 words that carried the weight of an extraordinary journey. When she looked up at him, her face illuminated. By the stars and by an overflowing happiness, Robert already knew the answer. Even so, the words, when they came, filled his heart in a way that no professional success ever had. Yes. 1,000 times yes. He took her in his arms, feeling simultaneously powerful and vulnerable, exactly as it should be. The kiss they shared tasted of promise, of future, of infinite possibilities. Later, when they returned to the mansion, no longer a fortress but a home, Robert received a notification on his tablet. An automatic update on the development of Sullivan Tech's new app. Connect Sensitive, inspired by his journey with Deborah, wasn't just an evolution of the original Connect Sun. It was a revolution. Instead of facilitating isolation, the new platform used advanced technology to help people overcome emotional barriers, to find genuine connections despite their fears and limitations. The name of the central artificial intelligence system? Deborah, Developmental Emotional Behavior Optimized for Relational and Healing Connections. As he watched Deborah peacefully fall asleep beside him, Robert reflected on the improbable paths that life had traced for both of them. A bicycle accident, a violent storm, a bracelet with a hidden note, a partner with obscure intentions, a challenging disease. Each obstacle, each seemingly casual coincidence, had been a thread in the complex tapestry that had united them. And now, together, they were weaving something new, a future that neither could have imagined in their loneliest moments. The last thing Robert saw before falling asleep was the new bracelet on Deborah's wrist, softly glowing in the room's dimness. A complete circle. A new beginning. Dear listeners, we hope that Robert and Deborah's story has touched your hearts and shown that, even in the loneliest moments, the universe can surprise us with unexpected connections. For more moving stories like this, we've prepared a special playlist that you can access by clicking the link on the left. If this narrative awakened something in you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel, leave your like, and share your impressions in the comments. Every day we bring new American stories that explore the complexities of love, overcoming, and the encounters that transform